we go.
There we go.
Here we are. We are actually live and talking to the internet. So congratulations. You're
Yay.
right now you're talking to 0
I'm
people,
ready.
but soon we'll have more. So
Yeah.
all right. So welcome anybody that watches this lovely program we have here. My name is Mike Mills. I'm with Verity Mortgage, and today I have Leanne Rand with me. She is with Front Real Estate here in Arlington. We're in Mansfield today, but does real estate all over town. And I wanted to bring her in today because we want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the market as a buyer specifically, because due to all the conditions that have kind of occurred, the market has shifted quite a bit. We're actually kind of leaning more towards buyer's market now than we have been. We were very heavily in the seller's market realm for a long period of time, and now we've kind of shifted out of that. So, and as scary as it may be with high rates and everything that's involved with the market changing like it has, there are a lot of opportunities for buyers that, they may not be aware of because, the fear of buying a house right now and the uncertainty of the economy and, you're paying a higher interest rate compared to what it was before tends to put a lot of people in a position where
Right.
they're nervous about it. So we're going to talk a lot about that, kind of get Leanne's perspective on it. Being a relatively new agent,
Right.
she's been in the business for a couple of years, but also has had some experience in real estate, which led her into that. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that, and then hopefully, give you guys some tools to help your buyers understand what opportunities are available to them. Our job is as real estate professionals, whether you be an agent or a lender like myself, is to provide our customers with information on the current market conditions. And with that information, let them make their own decisions that's best for them and their family. But there's certainly some information that a lot of buyers and sellers aren't necessarily aware of because they don't do it every day. So we want to try to answer some of those questions and, help point people in the right direction so they can make the best decision. But all that's industry stuff that, gets boring after a little bit. I'm way more interested in the people. So, Leanne, you came from a background of, you were doing flip houses, you were involved in real estate investing, and then ultimately decided to get into real estate. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How'd you get from, flipping houses to selling houses and everything in between? And then I know you got some kiddos, and
Right.
so what happened all there?
Well, my background or my degree is in accounting. So I started as a CPA, and then I started having kids and kind of left that profession. And I was a stay-at-home mom while I was raising my kids. Ended up being a single mom when my youngest was just an infant. So that was 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I've been a single mom for that long. And so
you've been sledding by yourself.
I have been, and investing in rental properties, flipping houses, things like that allowed me to have a flexible schedule and still be at all of their events and activities while I was raising them. I was active in the PTA and all the way from elementary school through high school with all of them. So it was really a good way to stay involved and have that income coming in.
So how did you go from being a single mom to flipping houses? I mean, that's a lot of times you think about your one income household in a lot of cases, right? And you're, making it to get by. So how'd you get from that? How'd you make that jump? Like what was your first investment or flip? Like what was the very first one that you did?
The very first, well, I started just buying rental properties as I could and doing that. And then I had my sister and my brother-in-law come and fix up one of the rental properties. And they decided they had a lawn care business at the time, but they were really good at that sort of thing too. And so they came and started working with me, and we started buying things that needed to be fixed up and flipping them. And I had a partner, Carol Ann, know Carol Ann.
Yes.
We were a partner. We started a Pixie Dust Properties.
Nice.
And
love the name, Pixie Dust.
We were both single moms, and it was just something fun to do with her and something we could both do together. And we'd invested together on these properties. And then my brother-in-law and my sister would come and fix them up, and we'd flip them. And it just got to be
so it was a whole family affair.
It was a family affair. It really was. Yeah. And so we just went from that and just got a little bit bigger. And then things kind of slowed down after a while with the deals just weren't out there for flipping. And the kids grew up and went off to college. And then I was an empty nester here. So all of my kids went out of state to college and have kind of stayed out of state.
Those damn
so
kids, man. They
I
don't
know,
appreciate. Like,
I
get to hang out with
know.
mom for a little bit, and you're taking off to Nebraska or
Right.
wherever. Yeah.
Well, not
I
Nebraska
know.
really, but my son's out in LA with his
Oh,
wife, and they
okay.
just had my first little grandbaby, a little girl. Yeah.
Congratulations. All right. How old is she?
She is 4 months old.
And what's her
Yeah,
name?
Penelope.
Penelope.
Yeah,
Okay. How
yeah.
many times have you been able to
Oh, I
see
see. I
her?
just got back from seeing her last weekend. I see her about once every couple of months.
Okay, that's
So
good.
yeah, I've seen her a few times.
Hard
now.
to leave
So
when you got to go.
it's very hard. It's very hard. And
Yeah.
then my daughter Macy is out in New York.
Okay.
She's trying to make it on Broadway.
Oh, wow.
Auditioning and
Yes.
things like that. So she's
Is she a dancer, singer,
She's
actor?
a singer, actress. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
How did she get into that? That's pretty.
Oh, she just all the way through high school. Well, she was little, I guess, when I took her to her first play.
Uh-huh.
I took her to see Annie at I think it was at the Creative Arts Theater School that used to be in Arlington. It's
Okay.
not there anymore, but she
Yeah.
loved it, and she said that's what I want to do.
So she knew right from the jump.
She knew from, I think that was in first grade, and
Wow.
so she was in productions all through. At that theater, and then at the schools and through high school. And then she went to the Boston Conservatory for college.
Wow.
And she got her degree in musical theater.
It takes a lot to get accepted into a school like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The audition process is crazy.
Right.
And she got accepted there and graduated from there. And a lot of her friends are in New York now from school.
Okay.
And they're all just trying to make it,
Everybody's just struggling to try to get through it.
Yeah.
How long has she been in New York?
She's been in New York for 3 years, I think now.
So she was there during COVID?
Yeah, she was. Yeah. She was actually on a national tour of a show that she was in during COVID, and that got shut down. She was in a children's production of Charlotte's Web.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were in Memphis at the time when the world shut down, and they shut down the show, and she got
to be
sent
devastating
home.
too.
Yeah, when you're on a tour and things
well, especially
because
you at the time, like, you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah,
that could have been the last thing that last show you ever did, because you never knew when that stuff was coming back.
And so that just, the whole industry just shut down. And so now she's working in a coffee shop there. She has great friends, and she's just loving life
That's
in
awesome.
New York, auditioning for whatever comes up, and we'll see what happens.
Hey, that's an awesome life to have. I mean,
Yeah.
when you get to live in New York City, obviously it's expensive to live there, but still, that experience and that life, that lifestyle is very attractive. I can definitely see. And you got one on each coast. You got the West
and then
Coast
I have two more. I have 2 girls in San Diego that are in college there.
Okay.
So Lily is at the University of San Diego in her senior year.
Okay.
And then Chloe is at San Diego State University.
Right.
And she's also borderline junior, senior year. We're hoping she's going to get to graduate this year too, if all of her classes are available that she needs.
Right.
So,
but they're both at the school together?
2 different schools, but they live together.
City.
Yeah, they're sharing an apartment together, but they're at 2 different schools there.
Well, I mean, that's good. They have each other.
Yeah.
And their brother's
They're
not
the
that
best
far
of
away.
friends. Yeah,
right?
brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where everybody is. And I'm just here. And that's basically how I got into real estate once I was here by myself. And
you're like, what am I going to do?
I thought, I'd always thought about it, and I thought I'm going to go ahead during COVID. I thought I'll take the classes and get my license. And so that's kind of how that progressed. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and from the day you got your license and started selling to fast forward to today, October, or I guess November of 2022, you can definitely say you've existed in 2 very different markets.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Very different.
So tell me what it was like when you first came in, and then compare it to what you're experiencing now.
When I first came in, it was easy to sell a house, and I had listings, and you wouldn't have to do too much. You would just post them, get them listed, and then you would just have offers and buyers. And that was last year. And then this year I have listings, and it's much harder. And I told my brother, I said, I've never had to do this when it's hard before, so we'll see how it goes. But it's you just don't have the traffic on the listings, and it's discouraging. Yeah.
What are you dealing with from, expectations wise when you're talking to your sellers and trying to help them understand, what's occurred? Like what are some of the questions they're asking you? And then what are you having to try to explain to them to help them understand that this just isn't what it was 8 months ago?
Yeah. Well, the first thing when they were listing, they said, are we too late? Are we too late? And I said, I don't think so. Houses are still selling, but they're staying on the market a little bit longer.
Right.
And you might be on the market 30 days or 50 days before you get that one really good offer, but houses are still selling, and offers are still coming in. It's just not like what it was.
No.
So it's not a bad time to be selling a house. It's just not as easy as it was this time last year.
We're just we're at a transition, right? And
definitely.
We were in such a heavy seller's market for the last 2 years, because like a normal balanced, they use what's called months of inventory as like a measuring stick for how healthy or what direction the market is or whatever. And generally speaking, if you're in a balanced real estate market to where there's no true advantage for buyers and there's no true advantage for sellers, you can have anywhere between, say, 5 to 6 months of inventory. So what that basically means is if you have 100 houses for sale, then you are going to sell 20 houses a month, and that's 5 months. And if you didn't list any other houses, then you'd be out of inventory at that period. So so that's kind of, what a balanced market would look like. Well, now, or at least prior to today, we were in such a heavy seller's market that at any given point, I think we had less than 1 month of inventory available. So you had a situation with sellers where they would list their house for, say, $300,000, and they ended up selling it for $350 or $360 because they would have 25 people offering on the house. Right? Did you experience that? Yeah. And so with your sellers at that time, that was great, right? It was easy. The hard part was fielding all the calls from the buyers, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Feeling, analyzing each of the offers and seeing, the little details in each one that made them stand out. And
what did you do with the FHA and VA offers that were coming in?
Well, you had to consider them. Yeah.
You had to consider them.
But
they probably weren't being taken.
It was hard. No.
Yes.
No.
And I think that's what a lot of sellers or a lot of buyers were. The frustration for buyers at that time was that if you were an FHA buyer or if you were a VA buyer, any type of, I hate to call them government loans because they're not issued by the government, but they're government insured loans. They have certain restrictions that come along with them, especially like quality of a property. Like one of the big things for FHA buyers was with a conventional loan, you can offer over the list price. And at the time there was, and there still is, an amendment, that you could sign and say, I'm offering $350 for your $300,000 house, and I'm waiving my right to the appraisal. Not that we're not going to get an appraisal, but I'm just saying, regardless of what it appraises for, we're paying $350.
Yeah.
Right. So the seller had a guarantee to know, okay, well, I'm going to be able to sell that house for that price.
Right.
Whereas with FHA, for example, you can't do that.
Right.
You could. I mean, I think that we even got some agents that were, filling out the appraisal waiver for the FHA loans. You're like, okay, well,
I had to tell several agents, you can't do that.
You can't do that. It's not allowed. So, with FHA loans, as a buyer, they wanted protection. FHA is part of their guidelines is they want the buyer protected. So if you could offer over and you could pay over for sure if you wanted to, you just couldn't guarantee over. So if I listed the house at 300 and I had an FHA borrower show up and offer 325, well, they could pay 325 and they could offer 325. But if the appraisal came in at 315, they had an out and they could get out, and then they wouldn't even lose their earnest money. So that was always a risk for sellers and that's why you saw the market shifted so heavy towards cash and conventional offers, because there were so many people offering on the houses that you just didn't have a chance.
And I think sellers are also scared off by the repairs that FHA requires, or VA even. They want certain things to be done before.
Yeah, and as a lender, I think there's a little bit of a misconception with the FHA and VA deals, only because, don't get me wrong, there are certainly things that they have to look at. Like you can't have holes in the wall, appliances got to be working, plumbing's got to be functional. For the most part, you have to be able to walk into the house and live in it without any major issues. But even with VA, they don't have quite as many restrictions. They're a little bit looser on that. But they have things like pest inspections and there's a misconception also too, I think, in the real estate world for the agent side, that VA loans are bad because they think the seller's going to have to pay for a bunch of stuff, but that's just not true anymore.
Right. I did a really clean VA deal. And we didn't have any of those type of issues. I had a FHA deal where we did have, a few things that they insisted on being repaired.
Yeah. And there's always going to be stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that kind of left people, or I should say that left sellers with the lack of wanting to sell to a VA or FHA buyer, because they didn't have to, because again,
they had all
these other offers. Yes. They didn't have to do that. And so now it's changed and it's shifted a lot. So
Right.
what are you telling your sellers nowadays when it comes to what their expectations would be to list their house?
Well, you just back a year ago, it's like you might not have to fix anything, but
Yeah.
now you are going to have to fix things. You might have to have some concessions. You might have to have some allowances. You're going to have to bargain with this buyer,
Yeah.
and you're going to have things to intrigue them and to get them to want to buy your house. So it
Yep.
has shifted quite a bit
Mhm.
as to where the sellers used to be in charge and had a lot of leeway with what they could just say, I'm not going to make any repairs,
Right.
but you just can't do that now. You have to be
No.
competitive.
No,
Yeah.
you do. And when you're talking to your sellers about like where they start with their prices, because I think that was the other thing too, is when the seller's market was before, you could list your house at the tip top and even more than what the tip top was appraisal wise,
Right.
and still feel pretty confident about getting it. Now, if you do something like that, because there used to be the thought, well, we'll just list the list the house as high as we can, and then when we start getting offers, if it's less, then we can always come down. But I don't know that you can do that now. Do you think?
No, you have to start at a much more reasonable place,
Right.
and then be prepared to do a price improvement after a week or 10 days if you're getting, no interest. You see a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah.
It'll be listed, and then after 10 days or so, you see a price improvement, and then you might see another one and another one. So yeah.
Yeah, it's causing I was going to say I feel bad for sellers, but I really don't. Just because, I mean, really and truly, unless you bought your house last year, like the people I feel sorry for right now are the ones that paid $50,000 over,
Right.
got a job transfer or something, and then had to sell that house, and there's no way in the world they're getting their money back,
Right.
for what they
That's
had
true.
to put into
Yeah.
it and pay over. So those people, my heart goes out to. But if you've lived in your house for the last 5 years and you have to sell it, well, odds are you've got a pretty substantial amount of equity in there,
Right.
because we've been at a 20% appreciation clip for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to make, the mint that maybe you thought you were, but you're still going to do pretty well,
Right.
and I think that's the hard part, is because the shift happened so quickly. We went from
Oh yeah, it happened very quickly.
2% rates to 7% rates
Yeah.
in like less than 6 months, and then everybody freaked out and just put everything on pause. So are you dealing, well, let me actually, one other thing about the sellers. I think that there was an expectation. You said, the house is listed for 10 days and then you'll see the mark come down and then, whatever. Well, in 2017 and 2018 and 2019, if a house sat on the market for 30 or 60 days, that really wasn't that unusual. Like it was pretty normal. And that goes back to that balanced market. When you have 4 or 5 months of inventory, the average expectation in a house sitting on the market is about 60 days. Like that's just about how long it's going to be there. And that's okay. Because I think what we deal with is expectations, right? What is our
definitely
buyer's expectation and what's our seller's expectation? So with our sellers, our expectation is coming out of the last 2 years, we're going to sell fast, we're going to sell at a higher price, and we're going to not have to do anything. Like you said, no repairs, no nothing. And obviously that shifted, and you guys now have the hard job of, talking to a seller that maybe hasn't been paying attention. I think everybody's kind of caught up now.
Yeah, I think so.
But even still, there's still little nuances to it that they don't know, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And you have to explain that stuff and go through and say, okay, well, here's how this is actually going to work.
Right.
And are you finding success, like in your listings, actually offering like closing costs inside of the listing?
I haven't started doing that yet. That's something I wanted to talk to you about today
Yeah.
to see what your thought was on that. But we haven't done that yet.
Well, my thought on it is, and I'm not an agent, so be very clear about that. So if I say anything that's incorrect, you can tell me, or anybody else does. But if I were listing my house, I absolutely would put it in there. And part of my rationale is that if I'm selling my house, then right now I have to sell it. Like nobody's selling their house for fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Not in this market. Right. I mean, 12 months ago, there were plenty of people that I talked to, like, yeah, we're going to list it, see what we can get, and I'm like, well, you got to buy something if you actually sell it. Right. So I don't think there's too many people that are just listing for fun. But what I do think is that if you are listing, then you have to sell your house, one reason or another. And those first 2 weeks, of listing, I think are really, really critical. and to your point, when you talked about pricing it aggressively that first time out of the gate, because that's when you get the most traction, right?
Right.
You know, those first 2 weekends when the house is, just listed, that's when you're going to get the most foot traffic through there, because it's a new property and all the people that have been shopping want to go see it. So I think you want to capture that. And then I also think that when it comes to the listing description, you can tell me the buyers that you have dealt with in the past. I know you do mostly listings, but the buyers that you have dealt with, would you say a good portion of them are searching for stuff before, like they're looking on Zillow or Red?
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're checking stuff out before they call. Hey, say I want to see this house. Now you're sending them the drips and you still have the stuff going to them, but they're definitely
they definitely say, what about this one? Can we go see this? Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's the case, which I feel like it is for most people, then when they look at a house on Zillow, they're going to see the description, and in that description is what you put in there as the listing agent. So if in that description it says something like, offering $10,000 worth of closing costs or percentages, I'm not sure what the rules are and what you can put.
Right.
But I think that's going to catch people's eye, even if they don't particularly love the house for whatever reason.
Yeah.
If you say you're giving them $10,000 to buy the house, well, I mean, let's go see it. Let's see what they do. And I even think, just from layman consumer looking at something, I don't know if I didn't have to, and again, I don't know the rules, but if I didn't have to put 2% or 3% or 4% or whatever the number was, because again, as an agent, you really don't know what you can give them because it depends on the buyer's loan.
Exactly.
So if a buyer's doing an FHA loan, they can do 6% of the total purchase price towards the seller, or towards the seller towards the buyer.
Right.
If they're doing a VA loan, it's 4% that they can do as concessions. If you do a USDA loan, or excuse me, a conventional loan, then it depends on your down payment. So it could be 3% if you put 5% down. It can be, I believe it's 6% at 10% or more. And if you put down 20%, you can do 9. You can get 9% of your closing costs paid, which there's no closing costs on the planet that cost that much.
Yeah.
But what it does do is, if you can get that much money, you can buy your rate down. So that everybody freaked out about having high rates, you could actually buy your rate down a point or two sometimes. I mean, you need quite a bit to do it that much, but that can help you with your payment. That can help you with your cash, everything. So as a seller or a listing agent, I don't know, how much, if you can put a dollar amount, but to me, if you could, the dollar amount's way more attractive than the percentage, because I just think people's brains, they see a 2 with a percent, like, okay, well, what is that? They're not calculating it in their head that quickly, or most people aren't. But if you put $10,000, you may not be able to give $10,000. It depends on the list price and all that other stuff. But I think that's going to catch people's eye, and then they're going to reach out to their agent and they're going to say, hey, let's go look at this house. Can we go see it?
Point. Yeah.
And if you're sending them the drips and they come out, through MLS, like you guys do, you're, generally speaking, if you're a buyer's agent, you're not looking at each one of those listings as they go out, because you're like, well, if they see something they like, they'll let me know.
Right.
So again, the buyer is the one that is seeing those numbers. So that's why I do think there's a definite benefit to putting that in there, just because you're going to get I feel like you're going to get a lot more eyeballs and a lot more traction in listings coming through, or I should say buyers coming through, than you would otherwise.
I do have a listing right now that I think that's our next step on, is to put something like that in the description.
Well, and it's weird. Why do you think, so I'm curious from your point of view, buyers have, and even sellers, I think sometimes in their head, because of the way it's phrased, like the seller's paying the closing costs, they balk at that. But if they said, well, they're going to offer $10,000 less, instead of 240, they're offering 230. They're like, okay, that's okay. So why do you think that? Just those, I mean, it's the same, but why do you think that is?
It's the same. I don't know. I had the same question.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you the same question. What's the difference between lowering the price or offering closing costs?
Well, the thing is, there is no difference. It's exactly the same. That's the weird part, is the money is the same. If I offer 300,000, or let's say the house is listed for 310 and I offer 300,000, then the seller gets 300,000. If it's listed at 310 and I offer 310 and I ask for 10,000 in closing costs, the seller's getting 300,000. Like they're getting the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference, but for whatever reason, I think it's like maybe a psychological thing where, and I really hear it more with buyers than I do for sellers. We're not, because obviously I talk to buyers every day. but they'll say, well, why would they give me money to buy their house? I'm like, well, because they want to sell their house.
Yeah.
And they want you to buy their house over somebody else's house. So
right.
they're going to offer you some sort of incentive to do that. That's why they would do that. But it does seem like a mental block for people sometimes to kind of get past that. Have you run into that much with buyers?
I haven't yet. No, but yeah, I have the first listing that I'm going to do this on is probably one that I have now.
And do you think your sellers will be amicable for that?
I don't know. I think they will be. I think it's been on the market for a few weeks now with not a lot of action. I've got a showing tomorrow that looks promising, but after that, I think that's when we will do something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I bet it's changed too on the listing side where you've had people that, you could list your house as is. You didn't have to do anything.
Right.
And now if your house isn't updated, cleaned, painted, staged properly, then you're not in the running sometimes.
Just totally different ball game now in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and it even went, I guess it flipped for agents too, because listing a house 8, 12 months ago was easy because you just put it up. Now I say easy.
Yeah.
You got to deal with the offers that come in or whatever. But from the selling side, like you don't have to, you may be making some agents upset because you're not taking their offer, but your sellers are like, this is great.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything. I get all this money. This is awesome. But from a buyer's point of view, it was a pain in the butt for them. Well, now it's like flipped. And so now from a seller's point of view, you're like, no, you have to do this. You have to do this. You have to give that. And they're like, what? Why do I have to do all those things? But from a buyer side, they're actually getting all the benefits now. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's really shifted. Have you worked with many buyers lately?
No, I haven't.
So one of the things that I run into with the buyer side of things is obviously rates. They're terrified of interest rates. And look, it does make a big difference. I mean, even when I have my math wrong a little bit probably, but because I'm going off memory, but let's say I'm working on a $300,000 purchase and someone was getting pre-approved for it. Well, at 7.5%, which is kind of where rates are kind of floating around right now, give or take, depending on the situation. You're looking at $300 or $400 more per month, probably $300 more per month than even at 5%. Because part of our conversations that we have with now is like, okay, here's what it is now. Here's what your payment is, blah, blah, blah. But when rates come back down, which they will, most likely. But when that happens, then you can get your payment here, and it's usually $200-$300 less. So a couple of percentage points. I mean, you're talking about 2.5 points. That's a lot. And it's shifted quite a bit in that time.
I think I had one potential buyer, and the first thing I always do is send them to you.
Oh,
and
thank you very much.
Yeah. So you have a phone call with them and then sometimes it doesn't go too well after that. Once you give them the realities of what it looks like now, a lot of them decide maybe now isn't the time for me to buy.
And that is really the toughest part right now is because, and I'm sure you run into this talking with buyers and sellers too. Obviously you're a realtor. I'm a lender. We want to do loans. We want to sell houses. Like, absolutely. Like I tell people this all the time, like, I'm not going to pretend like I'm trying to, this is just what you should do. But I do strongly believe that right now, first off, anytime someone says, when's the best time to buy a house? I always say right now. It's just what it is. But it has mostly to do with the fact that the appreciation values of homes go up so much, or on a year-over-year basis. But even more so right now, I think what a lot of buyers are missing or don't understand is that you have opportunity right now. There was not opportunity 6 or 8 months ago. It just wasn't. You didn't have an opportunity because if you were, like I said, if you were FHA or VA, or you didn't have $100,000 in the bank to pay 50 grand over, then you weren't getting a house. And especially not to mention the fact that, go try to buy a $250,000 house 12 months ago.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
Nope.
You couldn't get them. No way it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but rates were 2 and 3 and, at 1.4%, like they were really low. And so that was a huge benefit for buyers, but they were also paying 50 or 60,000 over. And like we said before, they're never getting that money back once the house is purchased. So, but right now buyers have a true advantage because there's so much less competition, right? I read investment, strategies and people that do this stuff all the time. And so Warren Buffett is somebody I read and listen to all the time. And he always talks about like fear in the market. And basically his basic message is when people are buying, you should be selling. And when people are selling, you you should be buying, because there's opportunity in those environments. Because if you're selling when people are buying up, you're going to get a good value for what you're selling. If you're buying when people are selling, then you're going to pick up value from purchasing stuff that's, at a lower price. And so the biggest advantage that somebody could have right now is if they're looking to buy a house is that, yes, the rate's going to be high and their payment's going to be high. But ideally, that'll only be for a short amount of time.
Exactly.
12 months, 24 months, maybe something like that. And by the way, I'm going to get a t-shirt that says this, because I say it all the time. But interest is a function of time. It's not a function of money. So when I purchase a house and I pay 20% interest, okay, or excuse me, let's say I pay 2% interest, but I pay that interest for 30 years because I live in the house, I'm going to pay a lot of money in interest, hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? If I have a credit card and I have 20% interest, then I'm going to pay, but I don't run a balance on that credit card, then I don't pay any money in interest, because my rate's 20%, but it doesn't accrue. There's no interest accruing because there's no balance.
Yeah.
With a house, there's always interest accruing because there's always a balance until you pay it off. And so whether it's 2% interest or 20% interest, it's all depending on how long you have that interest as to how much it impacts your financial situation.
Right.
So if I have 7% interest or 7.5 or 8, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I only have it for 12 months or 24 months, and I can get it to 5, or I can get it to 4, or whatever when the market adjusts. Well, then I'm only impacted by that high interest rate for a short amount of time.
Right, exactly.
The problem is that if you don't buy a house right now, which I'm not saying you should, because everybody's situation is what it is. But if the mentality is rates are too high, I can't buy a house right now because the payment's too much, I'm going to wait until rates come back down and then I'll buy. Well, so is everybody else.
Right.
Right.
That competition is going to shoot up the minute the rates go down.
That's right.
And we're back to last year.
That's correct. And oh, by the way, they don't have to go down that much for that to happen, because everybody's, well, when it gets into the 2s and 3s, look, this is just my opinion, but I don't think it's going to get to 2s and 3s unless we get into a really, really deep recession and have some issues. I don't see that happening because that was artificial. I don't know how much you know this kind of stuff, but so people think that when you move interest rates or the Fed moves rates, they're moving mortgage rates. They're really not. The Fed interest rate is the rate that banks borrow money from each other. That's what they pay each other to borrow money, or borrow money from the Fed directly. And so then that, I hate this word, but it trickles down into everything else. But for mortgage rates, what the Fed was doing is they were buying mortgage-backed securities, and they were doing what's called quantitative easing, where they were purchasing mortgage-backed securities, which were then driving rates down, because they were driving the demand for mortgage-backed securities up, which were driving interest rates down. Well, the minute that they stopped doing that, which was a few months ago, that's when you saw rates start to climb back up, because there wasn't this behemoth in the market that was artificially purchasing up all these bonds that were driving rates down. So they stopped doing that, and that made the rates, jump way up. I mean, we went from 3% to 7%, like 6. I mean, it's just crazy how fast that goes. So when the rates move that quickly, it's a shock to the system. Everybody's like, what just happened? But if you're waiting for the rates to come back down, even if they come to 5, okay, well, all of those people that are terrified because I wasn't going to buy a house at 7 or 8, well, as soon as it gets to 5, well, it may not get any lower. So, and I can handle that. So let's go. Right. And so then everybody's looking again. And so now we go back to a seller's market. We go back to paying $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over. And we're back in a situation where if you're a first-time home buyer, or you're trying to find something in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, kind of out of luck. Right.
Yeah.
And that's not an ideal situation to be in.
Right.
Would you think?
Right. I agree. Yeah.
When you got into it, what were you like into real estate in general? What were the things that you were hearing, and what is different about what it actually is versus what you thought it was going to be?
I don't know that it's much different other than what's happening in the market.
Just the market changing.
Yeah, just the market changing. Other than that, it's pretty much what I expected it to be.
Okay.
I mean, I'm learning a lot about first-time home buyers and things like that. And well, just from talking to you, like the conversation we had the last time about the rate buy downs that are going on now and things like that. And I'm always learning more about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was something I wanted to talk to you about today too. So you could explain, how much cash does a first-time home buyer have to come up with?
Well, I
to
mean,
buy a house these days.
Really right now, I mean, like I said before, you can probably get away with just having your down payment, honestly. And FHA loans down payments, 3.5%. Conventional, if you haven't owned a house in 3 years, is 3%. VA 0, USDA 0. So there are many, if you're a VA buyer right now or a USDA, you have to kind of live out in the country a little bit. But if you're trying to get one of those loans, there's literally circumstances where you don't need any money at all.
Yeah.
You may have to pay for an appraisal. Maybe you have to pay for an inspection on the house. Obviously suggest that you do that.
Right.
But outside of that, you could.
What about cash for the buy down, the rate buy down?
So the buy downs, the way those work, there's a couple different versions of it. You have a 3-2-1, you have a 2-1. But it's kind of one of those things where if you can get the seller to pay for the buy down, it makes a ton of sense. If you are trying to do it on your own and you want to just buy the rate down, it usually doesn't make sense because the amount of money that it costs you, because to do say on average, let's say it's a $300,000 house, maybe $350,000, and you're buying the rate down. It's like a 2-1 buy down where, and the way that works, by the way, is say right now the rate's 7.5%. Then for the first year, your rate's going to be 5.5%. And then for year 2, it's going to be 6.5%. And then for year 3 and beyond, it'll be 7.5%. Okay. So it ticks up over time. So it keeps your payment lower. And like I said, 2% on that could be $300 or $400 a month less. So if the seller's paying for it out of their pocket towards your closing costs or towards, it's actually there are limits on closing costs that you can give, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, depending on the loan type.
Right. But with the buy downs, they don't apply because it's actually prepaid interest. So you can get as much as you want on that to some extent and not be considered in the seller concession. So you can get more. But, the average cost on that's probably $20,000 to $22,000 to get that to work. There are a lot of builders that are doing that stuff because they're trying to get these houses gone. And then if you can find a house that you can negotiate with the seller to say, hey, your house is listed for $330,000. I comped it out. It looks like it'll comp out at $340,000. We were going to ask for 10, but we really want to get 20 because we want to use this buy down scenario. But so instead of offering $340,000, we're going to offer $350,000 or, whatever the $10,000 over the list price was. Right. I think I said a different number, but then you can make that work because the seller obviously gets what they want. They're trying to sell the house, and then the buyer gets their rate down, so, and if the seller's paying for it, then there's no skin out of their pocket or off their back. So, but it gets tough if the seller's not willing to cooperate to make that work just because of the cash outlay. So especially for like first-time home buyers, the good news is there are houses in this area that you can buy for $250,000. They're available. I know of several around here. Are they your dream home? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
Probably not. But it's way better than renting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And in 6 months or 12 months, whenever rates go down, it's not going to be there anymore. So you can get a good price for a home. You can get sellers to pay pretty much all of your closing costs, depending on the circumstances. If a house has been listed for a week and there's been 10 showings and there's 3 offers,
right, you're not going to have much luck with that.
Not going to get that strategy to work. But if the house has been listed for 3 or 4 weeks and they've done a price reduction once or twice, I would say it's a pretty good likelihood that you can get that. I mean, literally all of your closing costs. They can't, just to be clear, the seller can't pay for your down payment. So they can't give you money for a down payment. You do have to have that, but they can pay all of your closing costs, and you can add to the closing costs with the rate buy down. So another way to do a little bit better rate is, let's say that you're buying a $350,000 house and your total closing costs are like, let's say $8,000 or $9,000. Okay. $10,000, something like that. You got escrows alone are like $5,000. So, but you're doing an FHA loan. So you can get, say, $16,000 because you can get 6%. Let's say you can get $16,000 worth of closing costs paid. Well, you only have 10, right? So you don't have another 6. So the way that would normally work is if we don't add to the cost, which you say, why would I want to add to my cost? But if you don't do that, then that $6,000 the seller can't give you. So it just gets, the seller gets to keep it basically.
Okay.
So if you can negotiate that much, then what we would do as lenders is we would actually use the extra money to buy the rate down. Okay. Now you can't buy it down to the same degree, right? It's not like a 2-1 buy down where I can take you from 7.5 to 6.5, but I might be able to take you from 7.5 to 7.25 or 7.125 or 7%, just depending on what the market does. So in that case, having that extra seller concession, even though the costs aren't going to be that high, is a benefit to the buyer. And now sometimes that's a little confusing for buyers because they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me that my costs are going up. And I'm like, yes, we're going to, because I joke with people, but I'm like, if you can get it, I can spend it.
Yeah.
Like, I can spend it for you. But spending it is not like, we're not making money off of it. We are taking the extra funds that the seller is willing to give you, and we are charging you half a point, full point, whatever the discount is, to get you a better rate to spend all of that money so you don't leave any on the table. So at least it's a benefit for you, right? So that's the idea, is that get as much as you can, and then we'll figure out how to spend it so it helps you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So it's definitely something where if you're a buyer right now and you have gift funds you can get from a family member, you have a 401k or retirement account that you can get your money out of. And by the way, if you have one of those, it ain't doing so well right now. So
I do.
there might be better places to put it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's definitely better than renting for sure. But there's a lot of places you can get your down payment from. The down payment assistance stuff. Do you deal much with that, or
I don't. I know you and I had a conversation about that, and I really don't know a lot about that.
So the way the down payment assistance, there used to be, or here's whatever, the first time home buyer loans. That's my favorite. Everybody calls it we have these great first time home buyer loans. Okay, well, there's no such thing. There's a down payment assistance, and then there's a conventional loan if you haven't owned a home in 3 years that you can put 3% down. But anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine. So first time home buyer loans are marketing terms. But the down payment assistance stuff, there was a lot of those available when the market was going bananas. I mean, there was probably 15 or 20 at least, around here. There's only 3 or 4 entities that do them, but within each one of those entities, they have like 6 or 7 different programs for each one, and they all have different rules of varying degrees. But the way that would work is, let's say that I wanted 4% of my closing or my total purchase price given to me to use for my down payment and my closing costs. So that is something with down payment assistance can actually apply to your down payment that isn't your money. Okay. But the way that would work is, if the rate, let's say right now the rate's 7.5%, well, then the rate would be 8.5%. So you would pay a full point higher in rate to get that money. Okay. So it's always the same. Rates and costs are inverse of each other. If you have a lower rate, you're more than likely you're going to have higher costs. If you have a higher rate, you're more than likely going to have lower costs. It's just how it works. So what they would do is they would charge 8.5%. You would take that rate, and then you could actually refinance it or do whatever you want with it any period of time. Now, the difference between now and then was when they were doing that, then the rates were 3% and 4%. So the odds that person, so if I was at 3, then I was taking a 4% rate. Well, the odds that I'm going to refinance that 4% rate was very, very low, because it was 4%, for a long time, and the rates weren't enough of a difference to make sense to refinance. So you could technically refinance whenever you want, and there's no repercussions. So what happened when the market shot up like it did with rates is all of those bond programs and down payment assistance programs all basically contracted. And now there's only like 4 or 5 or 6 different ones that you can do. And the downside to those is you're still doing the same thing. Well, first off, I'm only getting 2% now. There aren't too many that do 3 or 4%. So you're not getting a ton, maybe 2 or 3% towards, your total purchase price. And then that money has to go, to your down payment or your closing costs, and you're paying the 8.5 instead of 7.5. But whatever money you get, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, whatever that number is, it goes as a second lien on your property now. So if you refinance that loan, in most of them in 3 years, within 3 years, then you have to pay all that money back.
Gotcha.
So they're basically locking you in and saying, for the next 3 years, you have to have this loan. I mean, you don't have to. You can refinance it. You just have to pay it back.
Just lose that. Yeah.
Right. So, and my whole thing with all of those is I think they're very effective in a lot of different circumstances, The problem is that I don't think people explain them well enough to buyers. And so they think they're getting either free money or something that's, whatever. And it's really not. It's just, if you, again, from where I started in the beginning, as long as we explain it and we give them all the details and all the information, then we have to let them make their decision on whether or not it makes sense.
Right.
And I would say the cases that it makes sense is if you're renting and your landlords just raise your rent another 20%, which by the way is happening across the board.
Absolutely.
Then you're going to be way better off taking it, a little bit in the short term, having the higher rate, paying the cost. So that way you can, benefit of having the appreciation of the house. Because again, like we said earlier, once the rates shift, which they more than likely will, it's just a matter of when, then you're going to see the frenzy go up, which then is going to make the appreciation of the houses go up. So now the houses are going to be worth more. So if you buy a house today for $300,000, it's going to be worth more in 5 years than it is today. Right. So, and all that appreciation that you pick up it's not free money. It's like found money. It's, you didn't have to earn it. You just are literally living in your house and you made $50,000, for existing. Yeah. So it's not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
Right. Are you doing anything different as far as like, your marketing or your, working your sphere a little bit more? Like what kind of habits have you kind of put yourself into to try to change or adjust to the market as it's changed?
Well, I'm trying to do more and trying to do different things. Just trying to get it out there on more different channels and blast it out to different markets and things like that. So things I didn't really have to do last year.
Right.
So,
but you say you do a lot. You did a lot with the PTA stuff, so you have a pretty good circle of people from that.
Yeah.
Are you just reconnecting with them and
reconnecting with people and I have I'll list a house in a neighborhood that's close to one of our schools and I'll know all the neighbors around there, and get them involved on, help me find you a new neighbor.
Oh, that's right.
Things like that.
So, you get them in there and tell them, hey, help me find somebody that you want to live next door to. Exactly. We'll give you some approval process on that.
But I'm always trying to think of ways to, to market more and get it out there because you're right. Last year I didn't have to do that. You could just list it on MLS and that would be all you'd have to do.
Yeah.
So
being a listing agent the last couple of years has been, again, aside from dealing with all the offers, has been pretty easy. But now it's kind of like if you can get on the buyer side of things, you're going to have a greater advantage and have a little bit.
Right.
Again, they're few and far between. So that's the rub. But
I've worked with a few buyers, but nobody has really followed through yet. I mean, they've gotten discouraged, and they might be back.
Yeah.
But they get a little discouraged.
The payment stuff is hard. It really is. Yeah. My big fear, and I had lunch with another agent this afternoon, and we were talking about this as well, is that when you look overall at how many houses are being built right now, the number is declining. It's not actually, you would think, because even right now with the market as loose as it is, or I should say as tight as it is with no buyers, beating down doorways, there's still only like less than 2 months of inventory, maybe a little bit more than 2 months. I know it adjusts a little bit, but there's maybe 2 to 3 months of inventory in the market. That's it, at least around here, in Dallas Fort Worth. But my big fear is that because they're really not building more homes, they're building some. It's not like they've stopped, but the number's going this way. They use a housing start number, how applying for permits to build homes. The single family residences are down and they continue to go down. They are building condos, they're building apartments, they're building townhomes, they're building duplexes, multi-unit properties, so people can rent. The downside with that is that, we're living in a world where we don't own much anymore. Right. Most people or a lot of people lease their cars. You own your phone, sort of, but it's only has shelf life of about 2 years. And by the time you get to that 2 years, you've just paid it off and now you're having to buy another one. And now, remember when we were kids, you had CDs and DVDs and, you owned all of your music, but now you don't. Now you pay Spotify and you pay, by the way, I'm on Spotify now, which is really cool. So this will show up there. But you pay Spotify, you pay Netflix, you pay HBO, a monthly subscription, and everybody wants to tap into your bank account and pull money out, every month. And there's a lot of convenience in that, and it's great. However, it's starting to bleed into housing. and there's fewer and fewer houses available. It's becoming more and more expensive. People aren't making enough income to keep up with the price of homes.
Right.
I read something not too long ago. It's a little outdated now because this has been probably a year or two, but it said that factoring in for inflation, that the cost of college, or I should say, let me back up, the cost of a car from 1995, and I think this was like 2015, so it was like a 20-year stat. From 1995 to 2015, the cost of buying a car had gone up 300%. The cost of college education had gone up like 400%. And the cost of a home had gone up like 600%. And when you factored in inflation for your income, people's incomes had only gone up like 100% in that same amount of time. Mm. So they're not making enough money to be able to afford the amount of house that they're trying to buy. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck because you're just trying to pay your bills and get through life. And that's hard enough as it is. Mm-hmm. So you don't have time to save money or enough money to save money. So you don't have enough income to afford the price points. You don't have enough cash to be able to put down and pay the closing costs and do all that other stuff. And so my fear is that we're going to get to a generation of people that just can't buy homes because they just can't, because they're too expensive. And so then we have all this co-op living, and you even see stuff now. It makes me laugh. I'll see stuff on the internet about, younger people really prefer to live with everybody else in like a co-op environment. And then they're over there going, no, we don't. Like when I was 24, maybe, but now I want to have a family and I want to have a yard. And, so all of that stuff seems like it's starting to kind of go away, which even puts more emphasis on, if you can be in a position to buy a house, like now's the time to do it, because it's just going to get more expensive. Or are you telling your kids this kind of stuff?
I am. Yeah. And that's what the message I'm trying to get across to people now too, is like, if you can buy now, buy what you can buy now, because it's a great time to get in. There's opportunity, like you said. The minute the rates start going down, the opportunity is going to be tough.
Does your son own a property in California?
No, they rent.
They rent out there.
Rent an apartment.
Yeah, they understand how expensive it is for paying for. And I'm sure your daughter rents in New York.
Yes, she does. She has 2 roommates.
And then your 2 kids that go to school, they live together, but they rent as well, I'm sure, in college.
Yeah.
So are you trying to, or do they have any interest in buying homes?
They do eventually. My son talks about it a lot, that he would like to. And I don't know if they'll stay out there in LA or if they'll come back to Texas, but he's always talking like that's the goal someday, is to own a house.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
At least they're aiming in that direction, right?
Yeah.
What about your daughter in New York? She talked about it.
She doesn't really talk about it much because
she's living the life.
It's so expensive there. And, I mean, every once in a while she'll say, this apartment is only, 300,000 or 300, which is cheap for New York, but she gets it. She gets that it would be better if she could buy an apartment and charge her roommates, to live there, that would be, she gets it, but she's just not at that point, where she could do that.
Well, like I said, the income and the cash and everything needed to be able to do it. We'd all love to do it, but you have to have the circumstances.
But they do see the benefits of owning, and I do think that they would all like to do that at some point.
Right.
They're just not quite there yet. So
yeah, well, there's a lot of people that aren't quite there yet. And I don't want my tirade or whatever you want to call it, my soapbox to make it sound like that, you have to buy, or, you absolutely, because again, everybody's different, it's not for everybody, it's not always a fit depending on your lifestyle. But if it is something that you are considering, and it is something that people that want to do, or that have a goal for it, as painful as it is to say right now is really, I mean, I could say in 2 months it's a better time then, because maybe prices come down some, but when you look at the parity between interest rates going up 300% or 400%, from 3% to 6%, that's a massive jump. And home prices in that same period of time have only come down like 3 or 4%, 5%. It's been a small decline. They're sitting longer, as you're experiencing.
I
am. But they are still selling. It's just a matter of time. So it's tough to swallow 7.5% interest. But 7.5% interest with, a down payment of $10,000 is pretty good compared to 3% interest and needing $70,000.
Exactly.
You know, because that's what it was.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And now it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So there are opportunities to be had.
Yeah.
There are circumstances where you can really take advantage of the market as a buyer. But you got to get a good agent like Leanne to point you in the right direction, so you know what you're getting into and what to ask for. And you have to find a good lender that can at least give you all the options and lay everything out for you. Because once you know it, it takes a little bit of the fear off of it. And I really do think, you know, this isn't just optimism. Well, it probably is. I'm an optimistic human, but I really do think that you will see rates start to adjust. The industry generally is thinking, you know, second quarter, summer of next year, something like that. You'll start to see it come off then, and that's great. And if you think you want to wait to buy till then, I understand. But we're not talking about 3s. Probably we're talking maybe 6s or 5s as it comes down. And again, what does that come with when the rates come down, Leanne? Competition. We're back to multiple offers, and
they get crazy again.
Yes, now you're at 5% paying $60,000 out of pocket.
Yeah.
Still makes 7% at 10 grand look a lot better.
Right.
Don't you think?
I think so.
All right. Well, we've already chewed up an hour. So,
surprising.
Yeah, well, I ramble on a lot, so that tends to eat up a lot of time.
I always learn a lot. And I think one thing I always tell my buyers, you know, is like, you're going to work with us as a team. You know, I send them to you and you're going to explain things, and then I'm going to show them the houses, and you're going to figure out how they're going to afford it and finance it. So it's, you know, it's not that scary of a thing when you think about it. And once
you pull the curtain back a little bit, you reveal the, you know, Oz behind the curtain. It's really not scary. It's the thing I like to say is just that, look, I tell buyers this all the time. Like, I do this every day. This is my boring job I wake up to and go do or whatever. And so I understand it. I live it. This is what I do. It's not scary to me. But they don't, right? I don't fix cars. If I take my car, I know nothing about automobiles. If I take my car in to get it repaired, I'm just crossing my fingers that I picked a good guy that's going to take care of it or whatever. Because I'm not a metalhead or auto junkie. So we all have our, you know, our lanes that we stay in and our expertise, and you just have to find people that you trust to kind of lead you around and show you in the right direction. As long as they're willing to provide you information on what you're trying to do and not trying to steer you in any direction or the other, then that's all you can ask for. And you know, I hope that people understand that and know that you just got to ask a lot of questions and then think about it. But, you know, just to reiterate, it's not, prices aren't coming down.
Right.
You know, do it now. They'll come down a little bit.
We're ready for you.
Yes. We're all ready. We're all ready all the time. So, well, I really appreciate you popping in for a few minutes and letting me talk your ear off for an hour. So, thank you for that.
Sure.
And if you guys ever need any help with anything, again, Leanne Rand with Front Real Estate. She will, she's a former investor herself, so she has a lot of experience with that. She has a great family of kids, so if she wants to hear stories about raising college kids, she can certainly help you out with that too. And she does listings excellent. So so please give her a call if you guys need anything. And that's all we got. You got anything you want to say before we pop off?
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, it was fun today. Thanks for everybody that stuck with us and hung out. We will see you guys again soon. Thanks a lot.